And the company is still subsidiary, is it?
Yeah, it sits there in Ghent, approximately 400 or 500 people there. I think they put more people in, not less. The platforms, they're a means to an end. They're taking you somewhere.
It is the recipe for a platform company to focus on assets. Why they don't manage it then?
They're very loyal. They take a considerable amount of time. They have a view on confidentiality regarding investment. Okay, I'm cool with that. But the quality of the interaction with the company is very high class.
How many times have you been proven wrong in the last years where you thought the answer was this and it was not this?
I can't remember the exact number.
I'm your host Philip, and welcome to a new episode of the Flot.bio show, where I interview the best Europeans in biotech to help you grow. Building a platform company with a new technology can be extremely powerful, but also has many challenges such as validating the tech and prioritizing your own assets through clinical trials. Edwin Moses has built one of the best platform companies in Europe with Ablynx, which is now part of Sanofi. So I went to Brussels to talk with him. I've actually interviewed him back in 2018, just when the deal closed, and he is since then chairman of 3 different companies, one in biosolutions for bioplastics, one AI in biotech, and one cell therapy for solid tumors. So we talked about how he feels now that it's been 5 years after the deal and what were his lessons. We also talked about the similarities between biosolutions, AI biotech, and platform companies such as cell therapy, and also how a chairman can help a CEO grow. So here's my conversation with Edwin. Welcome to the show, Edwin. So I want to start with what happened basically after Ablynx acquisition by Sanofi, which was, I checked, 3.9 billion euros. At that time, euro was like 4.8 billion, almost. So euro in dollars, euro was a bit stronger. That was January 2018, and I think it's still the second largest acquisition ever in European biotech. And I think the lead product in Cablivi, the brand name was approved and was launched. Some other programs I think were cut. So I'm curious, how do you feel now that it's been a bit more than 5 years, looking back on the deal? Like, how do you feel?
I think the deal came as a bit of a surprise at the time, because I think, as you remember, it started with a hostile bid from Novo. We had just moving towards approval of our first product and had set up a sales team and a commercial team. So we were all planning for the future and had raised hundreds of millions of dollars on the NASDAQ to fund the commercialization of the product. But when I look back on it, I think positive things most certainly are that Sanofi brought an enormous amount of resources. So if you take that lead drug that was approved, they now sell it all over the world. We would have only been able to sell it in certain specific countries. We wouldn't have had the capacity to do that. They have an enormous broad disease knowledge, so they can apply the platform more broadly than we could have applied it ourselves. I see that as very positive. If you look at the way the company is developed, and I see it from the outside in, so I don't have a very special information flow out, but just talking to ex-colleagues, what you see is the entrepreneurs moved on, because for them it's all about fast moving, about quick decision making, but the people with a lot of content knowledge and really understood deeply the technology have stayed and contributed that very well. So, and
the company still others like independent subsidiary physically.
Yeah, it sits there in Ghent, approximately 400 or 500 people there. I think they put more people in, not less. What's a big difference, I think, is a biotech really prospers by having low walls between different functions. So it's easy, the functions work, development, discovery, production, all of them, they're only 10 minutes walk away from each other. So you can always go and talk to somebody about what's going on. I think what you saw very quickly there with Sanofi is that the Sanofi research people talk to the research people at Ablynx, the manufacturing people manufacturing
some silos, basically.
Yeah, and when I talk to my colleagues, I think that's one thing that makes me sad's not the right word, but they don't know what's going on in the rest of the organization. I mean, for us, one of the things was, as a biotech, was communicating to everybody what the key things that were going on everywhere was. Now they know exactly what's going on in their departments very well, but they don't really know what's going on with here or there's a problem. It's just the way it is. It's not a criticism. It's just an evolution. So I think the the entrepreneurs moved on. The people who want to see things happen very quickly, who like working in small environments, have gone to find new environments. And I think one statistic that I love is that at present count, I think there are 12 CEOs now who are ex-Ablynx employees. So I think, if I look at the legacy and the thing that I'm proud of, 3.9 billion is fine and shareholders make money and those things, that I like that probably one of the most things as much of the products is that what it was an environment where people could learn and have the confidence they could go and do this themselves. And I think that's really, that makes me shiver. That's a really pleasurable result.
It's amazing, yeah. Especially in a European environment, which is typically lacking of qualified executives.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, I think was mostly the Sanofi Genzyme team who was, at least if I look to marketing the product.
Yes.
So I guess there was also more let's say, Boston. I don't know how. I guess now it's very integrated.
It's very integrated, but it was certainly led from the Boston side.
Okay, yeah. But did that have a bit of impact, as in like having a bit more of the biotech Genzyme?
Not really. I don't think that would be fair to say. No, I think they're a very professional, large organization that really just works as a machine and then sell.
And I'm curious. I didn't find, or at least I didn't really find the sales numbers. I just found like there are some estimates when the FDA approval came on in 2019 that could be peaked at 500 billion annual. What do you?
Yeah, I'm aware of what the numbers are, but I've been told that privately. But I think that peak sales is very achievable from what I can see. I think they're well on their way to achieving that.
Okay.
From what I can see from the outside.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if there was really public data.
There's been a little bit of public data, but I think basically it supports that original estimate. And it's
yeah, it's and actually you mentioned Novo, which is quite funny. Also was a show in the podcast because basically Novo lost that deal to Sanofi, and then they went to acquire Corvidia, which where Mark the Gaidel was on the show a few episodes back. It's funny how biotech is a really small world. I just kind of wanted to mention it. I also, what you mentioned, I'm curious also. You mentioned that you were prepared basically to roll out. You already had submitted for the European market approval. You're already I'm curious, when you look back, do you think there could have been basically more value creation? As in, if you look at Neighbor and Ghent, let's say Argenx, which is now basically in the 20 billion market cap, and I guess in a comparable situation, did you see that this could have happened?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the pipeline behind the product, the lead program, and the time of the acquisition. We had about 45 programs. Now, a number of those are partnered, but the RSV program, which you point to, which was discontinued by Sanofi eventually because they also had RSV programs. But we were very enthusiastic, and you can see the products that have been launched lately for RSV and the interest in it. And of course, the Ablynx program was an inhaled product, which had special advantages because of the nanobody characteristics. So, yeah, there were a lot of products coming behind. I think that could we have grown? I think the Algenix strategy is very, very clever. The pipeline within a product idea. You go through all the development and the safety issues around the product, and then you prove it's safe. And then if you can then apply that to multiple indications, that's a clever thing to do, and that's what they've done. But yes, entirely that. Having said that, I think when I last looked, to get that evaluation, Argenx had to raise about 5 billion in equity. Okay. We raised about 500 million in equity to get our valuation. So,
10 on the capital.
Well, yeah, it's not as straightforward as it seems. And of course, as we discussed at the time, we didn't set out to sell the company, but once someone initiates a bid process, it's very difficult to say no. And I think that I may have mentioned to you last time when that initial process or the Novo offer was announced, only one big shareholder called me up and said, "You don't have to accept any of these offers. We'll back you to stand alone." Everybody else said, "Get the very best price that you can." And that big shareholder was fascinating that they said, and it was, I'm happy to say it was Baker Brothers, a very famous North American investor. They had taken ages to build up confidence in the company. We'd been to see them for years and years and years, and then they made big investment at the NASDAQ. But by that point, they didn't need anybody else to tell them that they believed in the company. And so they were prepared to see us stay independent for a considerable period of time. But everybody else was very keen that we maximize the price at that point. So, and that's what you hear a discussion about whether CEO should sell the company or shouldn't. Not their job to decide that. They have to do all in the shareholders. Yeah, it's what's been the best interest of the shareholders. And if you get an offer, or the last time that was our share price was around 20, if you get an offer that ends up at 45, it's very hard to argue that's not in the best interest of the shareholders. You have to convince them you're going to get to 45 or 50 or 60 within a year or two. And we all know the risk in doing that. So I think at the time it was not what we planned, but we were also very lucky. Sanofi, being a French company, was very committed to Belgium, maintaining the site in Belgium. And then the research site. We spoke to American companies at the time, and one of the heads of R&D who I knew very well said, "Well, look, of course I could buy the company." He said, "But the minute I retire as the head of R&D, the American company will close you. And I don't want to see that happen." So in a way, getting a local pharmaceutical company was a huge advantage for maintaining the Ablynx territory and activity there.
And for watching, it sounds like a very fair, even premium fair deal for everyone at the end. Of course you can always think, fear, there's some missing out and what's the upsides, but if you look overall,
Exactly. And I think, we talked at the last time that you in clinical trials, a few months before that, we'd completed the phase 3 trial, and you turn over the card to say are the results good or bad. And I still remember the Saturday morning when I got the call from the chief medical officer, and you don't know what the answer is. And if it'd been negative, we would be in a different place altogether. And he said, "I think we've got a winner here."
I think because we still need to look at it.
And you think, and so, every time you do another trial, you found, and recently, Argenx, for the first time, has had a few little failures, nothing very dramatic, but, just reminds you, this is not easy to plan your way forward. So, no, I'm satisfied. I think the other thing I like, if I can just mention it, which I think is important, is people talk to me, this is Ablynx, current employees and ex-employees, as it being the best time of their lives. That they learned a lot, that they enjoyed working, all the extracurricular activities. We did a lot of stuff outside of work that the company promoted, parties, sports activities, all sorts of things, to make it a whole experience, not just work. But and of course the company benefits from building a relationship between the people in the company and the way they think. But they look back and say, "I don't think we'll ever have a time like that again." And that, again, I'm pleased, as well as the products and the technology. And of course, the other thing that happened when Caplizumab was approved was suddenly people believed, and it was always a shock to me, they hadn't believed before, that nanobodies could be real products. So now you've seen, I don't know if you follow MoonLake, for example, which has got a product that we licensed to Merck Serono, and they've licensed it at anti-L-Santin AF, which is doing fantastically well in phase 2 studies now. So that's another nanobody. The nanobody for TNF was approved in Japan by a Japanese company who licensed the product from Ablynx. So now you're starting to see more and more nanobody products how they get onto the market, approach the market. That technology is now being accepted as real. And there's a big pipeline in Sanofi of nanobody products. So that's exciting from the technology point of view.
It's good. Yeah, I want to jump on the technology. Before that, I want to mention, we talked in basically 2018, and the video is online. I will put a link. There's different details on the platform and what happened, and I think it's great also to compare. I listened to it again, and it's great to see. And I want to jump on the Baker brother comment you made, because I mean, they're super, super successful. First in the US, probably one of the most successful, and they're very famous for being very long-term investors, especially I think with Seagen, they were there for 15 plus years, and they made, I don't know how much the return was, I think 100-fold plus.
Yeah.
But they're also very famous for being very secretive. And actually, I heard about them not that long ago. I mean, I think maybe it was 2 years ago. I was talking with a VC, and they started mentioning it. I was like, no, I mean, okay, I would check it out. And then the funny thing is that I started like checking, and the only person I saw talking publicly about them was you, actually. In the article, I think it was some of like fears or status, and you were quoted there, as in because they invested, and I think you were saying that it took them a long time to invest in that. From a due diligence point of view, they were like very, very, very knowledgeable and doing it very deep. But once they were convinced, that they would go, like all in. Can you, I mean, and I also, one funny thing about secretive is that they're so secretive that they don't even put their name in the press release. It's always unnamed health, or what is it? Always a significant healthcare investor, which is really, really funny at the end. But I mean, that's kind of that choice. But can you talk a bit more about what makes them? How was it? What makes him so good?
Yeah, I think if you take it from a CEO's perspective, I remember going there early on in my career in Ablynx, and it was probably the most challenging experience of my career, because as a CEO, you go into the room and you might be used to meeting 2 or 3 people on the other side, and they would come out quite often with 8 or 10 people, and they would all be very expert, deep science. And, you would come in as the CEO with a sort of quite high-level picture. They're suddenly asking you, so what is the color of the eyes of the patient in this trial? Are you no idea? Obviously being facetious, but it's sort of really detailed questions. And I think that the amount of pre-research they did about every discussion, you go into a lot of investors, particularly here in Europe, but also sometimes in the US, where they haven't really done much preparation. They're not using their time wisely, they're not using their time, Europe time wisely. Never the case with the Baker brothers. They've gone through it, and then they call KOLs in the area. So they've already talked to key opinion leaders to ask them, well, this drug, they claim it's going to do this. Do you think it really will? Yeah, and so they'll actually say, well, I talked to a hematologist consultant yesterday, and you go, oh dear. And so but what it does is it makes you raise your game. You as a CEO, you suddenly realize, no, I need to be better than this. It's what I'm going to do. You also realize you need to take more of your colleagues with you, because you can't do all that on your own. You really can't manage it. But it's fantastic, but also challenging your story. And they've invested in other companies I've been involved in, and they're very loyal. They take a considerable amount of time. You're right. They have a view on confidentiality regarding investment. Okay, I'm cool with that. But the quality of the interaction with the company is very high class. They are very loyal to the company and to the CEO once they buy into you. And I think this is worth probably saying at the NASDAQ flotation that we did, and that was when they became a very important investor in the company. One of the things that was going on, as you can imagine, is you have a pricing discussion as you're trying to set the price for the flotation. And the banks involved said to me, oh, well, there's a lot of pressure from all the investors to lower the price. And I said, I was grumbling to myself. And so I thought, well, I'll pick up the phone to Baker Brothers, who I know are one of the biggest tickets in here. And I said, you're really putting a lot of pressure on the price. No. You fix the price at whatever you think's right, Edwin, because we're back there. So again, all about long term. It's not naivety. It's all about not trying to screw the company or the existing investors for the short term, but how do you build the company properly and building trust? And that's what they're so successful, because they have a long term view of those things. So I was able to go to the bank and say, well, biggest investor coming in is very happy with the price. And we were stuck at we stayed at the price. So I think all the type of people they employ, top class, and very, very good too.
It sounds like this really long term view on the public market is not that common, and I would see it. I mean, at least from my view, and from my experience with investors, I would see that kind of behavior much more like really high level VCs or angels who really bet on building trust, super transparent. And actually, I mean, from my little experience with investors at Biotech, which was what I liked a lot, with some of our investors, we were super open, transparent. Even the valuation, we never really like negotiated super hard. It was like, okay, what's the fair price, and then working with them for long term. And even when we sold the company, it was quite, I mean, relatively, obviously, I guess for you, I mean, the same when you've piled of money on the table, it always makes the dynamics a bit different. But still, it sounds very like, very, very good. But I guess it takes longer to show that it works from an investment strategy as well. I guess now with the CGen stuff, now they're looked up and it's proven to work, but it took them quite some years as well. But yeah.
I think they've had a lot of big successes, and they've proven that business model, and that I think you're right. It's got to be a long-term view. What I like about them, which is it's more prevalent in the US than it's in Europe, is they don't need anybody else to tell them whether this is a good idea or not. So actually, when you walk into them and talk, I've just got a big collaboration with Merck or with Pfizer, and they really love our technology, they sort of, it's a long blink. They're not really interested, because from their point of view, they will evaluate whether the technology is good or not, and they're going to make the call. And that's refreshing, actually. People who need other people to validate the idea, that's not such a strong endorsement of what you do. So you know that if they've gone through your story and your equity story and what you promised, and they like it, it's a good story. I mean, they really will shake it to them and make you think.
And are you still working with them on certain?
In a company, one of the companies I'm involved in, yes, they invest.
And it makes me think, talking about also investor, makes me think about the Strungmann brothers in Germany, which are, I mean, investing earlier stage, I would say, but a bit in the similar, like, I mean, the investors behind, now with Biotech, but many other Ganymed and many other successful, I mean, not most, but I would say most of the really successful biotech stories in Germany. And it's also amazing where, like, to just come in and invest. And Biotech is crazy how much they invested in. I think they still hold like 40% or something like of the company. And we're talking about 20, 30 billion company, which is crazy. But that's, I mean, I think it's also very, I mean, you say refreshing, but I think it's just very valuable for the whole ecosystem. And we need investors like this, like...
I think you need, I mean, you got pick people who more go with fashion. So, today everything is obesity, so they're all piling into obesity, and then something else, ATC people, the people who follow, and then the people who stay longer with the story. And they from a company point of view, what's good is they don't flip in and flip out all the time. You get a bad result, that doesn't mean that they think your technology is wrong. They can see through that. Okay, that didn't work, but okay, the other things will work. And that's, you need people like that who've got that, who are going to be with you for the long.
And why would you not work only or mostly with people like that?
Because there are not that many people out there like that. I think in reality, they're quite a small number of that sort of quality exist.
But you, as an executive, would you prioritize those kind of investors?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But it's not like a limited. Yeah. You would be. I mean, you need to work on getting them.
I think it depends what your proposition is. I think if you have a very strong proposition, it also needs quite a lot of money. I see European propositions here where the ambition is never quite the same as an American company. So then companies will formally come to me and say, well, I need to raise 20 million. Will you introduce me to US investors? And I said, well, the ticket size just, they can't, someone like Baker Brothers, RA Capital, it's hard for them to want to spend the time to do the due diligence to only get 6 million of the 20 million ticket. It's not the way they think about the world. So if you've got a big proposition where they can really put money to work hard, and it's a proposition that will stand up to their due diligence, yeah, absolutely, I would take those companies to them straight away. And then people like RA Capital and Perceptive and in the US that who Ablynx all have very good relationships with. I've gone to them again with other propositions very successful.
That's okay. Maybe talking a bit about the nanobodies, or let's say, you mentioned that the platform was basically using fragments, I think, from alpaca or fragments that you can then combine together. That a lot of properties. Inhaling will be one of them. Many other benefits. But what I'm amazed is always, there's okay, you pitch the platform and there's a lot of possibilities, but at the end of the day, you also need to prove. And you mentioned, okay, you proved it in a phase 3 and it works in patients, and then it kind of validates the rest of the platform, which I think is always, I would be curious, on how, I think what's really tricky, and also it comes a bit from my experience. I worked with molecular partners with, I think, a similar platform. Obviously, they would. It's similar, as in you could also have, you could link several, let's say they were not antibodies, they are alternative scaffolds, but DARPins, what do they call them? But I think at the end the benefits were quite similar, but they were struggling to really move the pipeline forward and validate the platform. I'm wondering for you, or some of the lessons maybe you've seen of how do you prioritize, I think that's really tricky, as in prioritizing, having your lead asset, pushing really forward to the lead asset, or doing more partnerships, and what's the best way basically to build such a, let's say, platform company?
I think it's a key question. It's something I get asked a lot broadly. The platform companies to say, what should we do? I think that if you go back to the Ablynx experience, it's just one data point. But the thing that triggered the sale was the lead compound. I've heard since that, let's say, it's around the number of the 4 billion euros that Sanofi paid, I've heard said to me that essentially when they did their calculation, they thought about half of that was for the lead compound, about half of it was platform. I only have that informally. I have no evidence for that. That's what I've heard around. I think, and then I've heard that they think that was a hell of a deal, getting that whole platform for 2 billion. That's not bad. And so, but I think that the trigger is often the lead compound, because that's the thing where you can actually see the asset, you can see what it can do, and you can see that it's validating the tendency.
Cash, I guess, from a revenue benefit also. Yeah, more palpable.
Absolutely. But platforms, they're a means to an end. They're taking you somewhere, and so you've got to show, where's the end journey taking you? We can take you to that. Oh, that product. Okay, that's an example of what it can do. Now I love the platform. But when you just wave your arms with platforms, that's harder. And I think that one of the things about the nanobodies, which was, and you mentioned the origin. So the origin comes that there's a group of animals, the camels, llamas, alpacas, guanacos, vicunas, which all have this thing that when you put an antigen into their bloodstream, they produce normal antibodies against that antigen, like we do, but they produce these little VHH molecules as well, much smaller than that. Yeah. So you can take those out and you can actually make them. Now, the advantage of those compared with the example you gave is that those have been produced naturally in nature. So they're already stable, they're already bind to their target.
The good confirmation.
Yeah, so they give you a lot of the properties straight away that you really want. So artificial approaches, you have to overcome some more hurdles. So these are nature. Now, the disadvantage of coming from nature is, as you can mention as a CEO planner, I've got this product that comes from llamas. Well, you see some investors just switch off as you finish saying that. Because, of course, the previous 20 years, everybody had been getting humanized monoclonals, stopped getting them from mice, and we gone backwards in the mind of some investors.
You were not humanizing them.
You can humanize them, but the source came from the llamas themselves. And so there's always the idea, oh my goodness, I put an antibody from a llama into somebody and it's going to cause them to grow ears or horns or 4 legs. And it sounds ridiculous, but there's a bias and a concern that there are going to be unknown disadvantages with that.
But I guess it's coming from the EMA or FDA as well.
There's always going to be challenges. That when we did our first clinical trial, there was the concern that you were going to get responses because it was immune responses because it was coming from a foreign source. In fact, they are very, very nice molecules to work with, and we, at least in the experience I've had with them, we didn't see any toxicity at all. I think then to your point about how do you balance platform against assets, I think one of the mistakes I see in platform companies today is that they're not investing enough in their assets earlier. So they present themselves for rounds of funding to investors, and they've got a candidate and optimization, and they're going to be in the clinic in 4 years' time or 5 years' time, and that's not quick enough. You have to start getting close to the clinic, starting getting clinical studies. At Ablynx, we were lucky because the product that we chose, we chose it because it was found that the nanobody could bind to the target, the Von factor, which was the target, better than any monoclonal antibody. So people had tried to develop antibodies to it, and they couldn't get it to bind strongly enough to do that. And particular reasons that nanobodies could. But then we went after a different indication, a bigger indication that didn't work out. And so we sort of, oh gosh, what can we do? And then we found this indication, TTP, very rare blood disease, where suddenly there was no drug product available for it. We could see how our product could work in that environment. And it was a market that from both a clinical trials and a commercial point of view, we could realistically develop the product ourselves to keep it under our control. Because I think that's the struggle for a platform company that's turning into assets is if it at some point has to partner that asset with phase 2 because it's in RA or whatever it may be, it loses control of that. And that's so key. I mean, back to the Ablynx story, the whole trigger was us getting phase 3 product success. And if the big pharma company is taking longer to develop your product because you partner with them earlier, that's very difficult for you. So it was a lot of luck along the way. Luck and being opportunistic, saying, that's important to see. And I think that's where the platform companies have also got to protect their investments. So it's super to do collaborations and invest in the platform, but you then have to ring fence your asset development and not always let it get dragged into another collaboration or something like that, because otherwise your assets won't move forward. And that's what worries me with some of these platform companies, where you see them, they're at too early a stage, and particularly in this financing environment where everybody's looking for later stage assets, it means that they struggle to get refinanced going forward.
If I bounce back on, it sounds also that it is the recipe for a platform company to focus on assets, and I'm wondering maybe why do biotech not manage that? Let's say, even if platform companies know we have to move our assets forward, why they don't manage it?
I think the two things, one of them is cultural. I think in Europe, again, the investors really like the validation of partnering platforms. They like it when you have a pharmaceutical partner comes in and partners the platform because it gives them reassurance that the platform is strong. The American investors are, as we discussed, a little bit more independent, so they don't really need that validation quite much. But if you're European biotech, that's what your investors are pushing you to do that. The other thing is cash generation. So nowadays, when equity finance,
so they push you, but from what you said, it's basically not necessarily the best way to go as the
best long-term solution. So what it means is, and I think this is where you're talking about companies more generally, you have to realize that each venture capitalist around your board has their own agenda and has their own boss they have to go back to. And so if they've been invested for 1 or 2 or 3 years in a company and the thing much is happening, they get beaten on the head by the boss. What's going on? If they can go back and say, we just did a deal with Merck, or we just did a deal with Pfizer, that gets them, everyone says, and that's fantastic. That must be just show what a good investment we've made. So I think that there are those pressures, and it's one of the reasons why I think CEOs have to own the business plan. I see CEOs, not where I'm working formally, but people come to me advice, and I had one the other week where he said, I'm going to present the business plan going forward to my board on Friday. I don't believe in it, but the VCs are making me do it this way. And that's not uncommon, where they feel, pick if you're a first-time CEO and you're surrounded by very strong, very experienced VCs who say this is the right way. Well, it may well be the right way from their portfolio point of view, but it may not be the right way for you as a company point of view. So I think so why do they make those decisions? Do the collaborators partly that? But also partly when equity is more scarce, to raise cash through that, to raise cash through upfronts from pharma companies. And you remember the Ablynx story, 500 million was from 500 million was from collaborations. Yeah. We've had to raise that through equity, dilute ourselves down more to do that. So that, and I think the other thing that I tell the companies I work with, that you learn so much from pharma, good and bad. You can see but you learn, they know an awful lot. And the other thing that you see is it helps you figure out how you should position your platform, because you might mention some features that you think are really important, and they might be totally uninterested. And then they suddenly find, oh no, this is what they're really interested in. And I'll give you one example. It's not long ago. So we were filing patents at Ablynx on everything that moved, basically, and she found that nanobodies could bind to ion channels, which are very interesting. But we really didn't know quite what to do with that. It was an interesting group. They're quite difficult proteins to deal with. And then one day we got a knock on the door from Merck, and they said, yeah, we're interested in your ability to bind to ion channels. And we started to sort of do the story and dance about it, and I told you, shut up. They said, look, we've read your patents, we've made the nanobodies, we've tested them out, they do work, you are right. So we want to collaborate with you because you are the experts in nanobodies. So they did all that work before they even come to talk to us. But then they taught us what their opportunities they could see with their therapeutic knowledge and their knowledge of the target base. What can you do with them? How could we work together for success? So I think you can learn a huge amount from the pharma companies, and that shouldn't be forgotten. And I mean, one thing also, when you look at the way the nanobody is developing, can be here in Brussels, but we're talking Precerix. So they've taken nanobodies, and one of the aspects of nanobodies, they're very robust molecules. I mentioned you can take them orally and they can survive the path of the gut. But they're also great for tying radionuclides to, because they don't get destroyed straight away. So they're great at delivering radionuclides to targets, but also they have quite a short half-life. So they actually disappear out of the system quite quickly, which is exactly what you want. Hit the thing and out. So there are all sorts of companies taking advantage of nanobodies. And there's one here also in Belgium using nanobodies in agricultural applications. Because they can do all sorts of things there. So it's getting broader and broader, the application.
Yes, it's good. Yeah. I mean, it's funny to read. I mean, it's interesting to hear your view, and then when I connected to what I've seen at Micro Partners, where you had also amazing properties in the platform, but yeah, I mean, at the end, you still need to prove it in the clinics, and finding this balance is just, and as you said also, I think we should not forget, but it's luck. There's luck. There's a luck factor, and there's a just science factor of if things work or not. And
exactly.
Every platform company, if you look back, I mean, at Ablynx, probably the science worked, as you said, worked remarkably well, and you had no problem in the clinics, and the good results, and you found the good application. I mean, the good indication, everything. I mean, that's a lot of things lined up as well. I don't know. I mean, we could talk longer about nanobodies and radio nuclear. I mean, I think there's a lot of things happening at the moment, but I wanna switch a bit gears, and you mentioned agriculture, which is great, because I wanted to talk a bit about, let's say, non-healthcare or industrial biotech. And you're a chairman of Avantium.
Yeah.
And I followed this company for a while, actually from a very long time ago, for almost when I started Biotech, or it was not even a company. And I met Denis Lucan at Sanofi, and he talked about Avantium and showed a plastic bottle. Okay, that was his flagship non-healthcare investment. Which is crazy is that now they really, I mean, really worked, and so they opened a massive factory and starting to roll out scale production, and I think some kind of replacement PET from plants in the petroleum. I was a bit surprised to see you on this board, which okay, not healthcare, not the platform, but can you maybe talk a bit more like how you came, how it came to be, and what's your view on let's say what the product and industrial biotech is now?
Absolutely. No, it's a really something I really like. One thing to say is that I was involved in Avantium even longer than you were by the Sanofi, because I was chairman back in 2004 originally.
Okay.
So after I left my first CEO job in the UK, I set up a portfolio of chairmanships and directorships, and Avantium was one of those. And at that time, Avantium had a number of activities, including activities in healthcare. So I was part of that, and I was chairman of that company at the time. And I only left them because when I moved from being chairman of Ablynx to being CEO, and I knew we were going to do IPO, and Avantium was thinking of IPO as well, I couldn't be involved with two companies doing an IPO and the Ablynx at the same time. It was too complicated. So I very regretfully parted way, but I knew Denny very well all that time. And then they came back for me in 2019, I think it was, after I stopped with Ablynx, and that which you consider being involved again. And Smith back, and who was the CEO, was someone I appointed when I was chairman first time round. So it's a very incestuous sport. And it was Danny Lucan knocking at the door saying he's now retired from the board, but he said, it'd be fun to be involved. Now, why on earth am I there? You're quite right. I look a little bit odd in terms of profile. But what I love about the company, first of all, is it's like a biotech. So it's full of very smart people, about 200 people, a lot of PhDs. They do very, very clever science, because their whole science is about taking sustainable sources and converting that into building blocks for plastics that are truly biodegradable and have advantages compared with current plastics. So as you know, a lot of plastics now claim to be biodegradable, but they take 200 years to biodegrade. That's not really. Ours can biodegrade in 1 to 2 years, depending on the conditions. So it's real. But it's all about from sustainable sources. What's fascinating is that you can develop these chemistries on the lab bench, just like in biotech. Where in biotech, the next step is to do a clinical trial. In this world, the green chemistry world of Avantium, the next step is to build a factory. Because the chemical companies don't believe you until you can make 5,000 tons a year at $10 a kilo, or whatever the price is. So you have to show the economics work, that you can scale it, it's safe to scale. And that's exactly what Avantium had to do. The challenges from my perspective are quite similar. And first of all, you've got a whole bunch of very clever scientists, and you have to think about how you're going to monetize and commercialize that, which is what people already worked on. But then it's raising money to build the factory. So this factory that we're building has cost a couple of €100 million more. We had to raise the money to do that. It will be completed this year, and it will make them 5,000 tons of this intermediate called FTCA, which is then turned into a plastic called PEF. And that plastic is already being used by big brand names like Carlsberg. There's the Carlsberg bottle with the names from this. Many industries.
Coca-Cola also.
Yeah. Major supermarket stores are looking at it for their own brand products and getting rid of normal packaging and producing it. And so the business model there is you build your 5,000 ton factory, and then that proves that you can make it at scale. And then people take licenses for that technology and build their own 100,000 ton factory somewhere else in the world, and you get a license income based on that. That's the way in which the commercialization works. But it's so similar because you are pre-profit quite a long time. You're burning money just like biotechs are. So I sit around a board table of people we constructed a board which is fascinating. So we have the CEO of Castrol Oil, for example, around the table, someone who was very senior in Tetra Pak, someone who's very senior in Ineos. So huge companies with very different perspectives of the world. But the thing that makes them nervous is when the cash flow is going down with the because none of their businesses do that. And
when the science takes longer.
Yeah. I'm very relaxed because I'm used to seeing cash running out all the time. That's life. So I bring that side of it, and they bring their huge knowledge of the end market and what people really need and how to position the products going forward. So it's a lot of fun to be involved in. It's still challenging because in contrast to biotechs, you have benchmarks in biotech. So say Ablynx or whatever, you've got people you're comparing yourself with, and the analysts will look at you. Whereas for Avantium in Europe, there really is hardly any benchmarks. So the analysts, when we raise money, announced that we're going to raise some more money. We recently just raised a 70 billion rights issue. Quite often, some of the analysts are, oh, they're raising money again. But what did you think we were going to do? You know, we don't have a product, a revenue stream or a sizable revenue stream yet. That is the nature of it. So, but they don't have any benchmarks to compare it with. So we are a pioneer in that. Having said that, we benefit certainly in the Netherlands from very strong political pressure to improve the environment and improve the way in which we source and make plastics, not from coal and gas anymore. So the government puts a lot of pressure.
Bioeconomy.
And so that means that we have a consortium of the major Dutch banks who support us with debt facilities in a way that a biotech company during you would never get that sort of support from banks. So there's a real benefit in that. You're a pioneer. Things are hard because you're at the front, but it's fascinating around to be involved.
It's amazing. I like it a lot. And I mean, it's crazy because you said you were involved at the beginning, but it took them 20 years to reach that. And what you mentioned, that it's one of the only, I think, it is. It's funny because I was always super actually really curious about this field of green biotech or environmental biotech from the beginning. And when you said you joined in 2004, I was still in high school. But when I started studying bioengineering, I was really fascinated with this, and it was the phase when you had all this biofuels, microalgae. Avantium was taking off global bioenergies in France, and things were starting to cook, but at the same time, a few years down the road where things quite collapsed, at least in the US for kind of biofuels, and still today hasn't really it was not an innovation phase. It was really just I guess maybe it will take off at some point. But it's amazing that Avantium, I think global bioenergies are still running and thing, but otherwise there was always not that many in Europe that have managed to survive and grow. I mean,
they have other technologies. I mean, they have one which is a carbon dioxide capture technology.
From let's say industrial biotech at scale, they're not competing, but
so it's. But I think one of the things you mentioned, which I'm always fascinated by, if you look at good ideas, a lot of the best ideas take a long time to germinate. If you look at Ablynx, well, it first began in the mid-1990s. The VIB supported it here in Belgium with the research, but it couldn't really get any funding. It took 4, 5, 6 years of them giving it soft money until 2001 the company started. And it was 17 years later that the first product hit the market. LabGenius, it's been going around 2007, I think they started. Now, it's fantastic, but it's taken...
And they were quite fast.
And they were quite fast. So good things take a long time to generate. And I'm involved in a company called LabGenius, which is in the UK. And some investors were asking me about it. And they said, oh, but it took quite a time to get there. Well, yeah, because when you've got an idea and a technology, it's not always obvious what you do with it. So you have to try and fail. But those are the special people who then carry on and find the right thing to do with the technology and apply it. But it's not obvious from day one. None of the big ideas are obvious.
That's the fundamental of innovation and also on innovation and also on doing things that have impact. I always have this quote that comes to my mind, is a quote from Obama, nothing worthwhile is easy.
Yeah.
And I think there is, in life, but also in, let's say, biotech or in innovation, there is some truth to that.
It's a lot of truth. And I think that one of the things that fascinates me about, what makes an entrepreneur, if I take Onno van der Stolpe, who was the previous CEO of Ablynx, my favorite stuff, because I know him really quite well, is the way he came back from disaster time and time again. The product that is now on the market, that Filgotinib, when he did the original, I think it was preclinical, he did a deal with a major pharmaceutical company, I won't name, and they ended up giving him back.
Came back 3 or 4 times or something.
They said, never put this into people. But they didn't only give it to him back. They sort of gave him a curse at the same time. And And I just think, when I looked at him, and I think in the lesson to all entrepreneurs is you are going to have horrible days. Things are going to go terribly wrong. And you're going to fight back and say, that's it. I'm going to have a glass of wine, go back in the next morning and start all over again. And that's what makes him. That's what made the great success that he developed. And if I take LabGenius, the CEO there went down some path that didn't work out and then figured out the way forward. And that was, and he's a good example of when he figured out this machine learning AI business approach that he wanted. He couldn't get any European investors to pay attention because he talked about algorithms and things like that. And that switched life science investors off because they wanted to talk about the environment. So what did he do? Got on a plane and went to the West Coast and found tech investors who understood exactly what he was talking about and invested in it. That's a real entrepreneur. I'll sit there in Europe and go, I can't get any investors. Get on a plane and go to the right place.
Find a solution, yeah. That's amazing. Actually, it's amazing that it works so well with James. Well, I connected you guys, actually, which is crazy.
Well, I'm doing some due diligence calls with investors at the moment with him, and they say, well, how did it happen? I said, well, I didn't realize at the time, but James was always going to make it happen. So I identified somebody who had a connection with me. And he's very clever in these whole idea of warm introductions. I mean, how that works. It's one thing just calling someone up and saying, oh, it's me. But if you get someone who has already got a connection and an established relationship, and that's what he used. I mean, yeah, you were at the heart of that. And it was very weird when he told me, I picked you out as the person I wanted, Edwin, if I needed to get to you, and I knew him, and I asked Philip, and he got the introduction going. So here I am.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I mean, actually, it's what's funny also what you're just saying is that I think he was basically, one of the first, let's say, AI biotech or whatever, machine learning biotech. I mean, they started in 2016, I think, so there's kind of ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
But I think now, and through our conversation, they're facing, at least to my view, similar challenges of a platform company, as in, it's great to have a tech and to license the tech, but assets are basically where you make also, where the value creation is.
Absolutely.
They seem to be now more, at least building a pipeline versus having only the tech.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that, but having said that, that's completely correct. That the first important collaboration they had was with Sanofi. And that went very well, to the point that Sanofi came out and said, I think it's also figuring out what can your platform do. And this is back to what I've told you before with the nanobodies. And with when I first went to James, one of the things he emphasized was how his technology could speed up R&D. And that's absolutely true. But when you look at the whole R&D process, it's taking a few months out of R&D. We had to say a 3 or 4 or 5 year process, which is great. But you're probably not going to get a head of R&D at Roche or head of R&D at Pfizer jump out of their seat to talk to you about that. But when you see how it's
maybe now a bit more, now that the whole AI is more, but
how are you going to really get their attention? Well, get their attention by what was now the key USP of LabGenius is, we will find things that you would never find yourself. So that's exactly what Sanofi said after we did the collaboration. We have found nanobodies that we would have never found ourselves because of the internal biases we have. And of course, if you look at the way pharma is structured, who runs the departments? Very clever people who spend 30 or 40 years doing discovery science. So they think they know this group here never works, that group they must have, their whatever. So they have their... And with machine learning, you take that all away. You don't allow that to come in the discussion at all. You just put data in and allow the machine learning, the AI, to do the projections. So then you find things that the human would have been biased and said, we can never manufacture something with that. Then, well, you can, because you can use machine learning to teach you how to do that. So I think that whole concept now of finding things that they would never have found, that is a very powerful concept. And finding them quicker as well then.
Yeah, from a value proposition, instead of saying, I cut down by 1 month out of 5 years and it's a few percentage of, and you say, okay, I find you a product that you would have never found. Yeah, makes sense. And then how do they balance with doing the internal pipeline? So then they apply the same thing to find things that no one else do, and then building the pipeline.
And they look at certain particular indication areas. They're interested in T-cell engagers where they can actually use the properties of machine learning, which is to evaluate in parallel different characteristics of molecules. So instead of sort of developing host from the binds and then looking at stability and then looking at something else, you can do 2 or 3 characteristics, optimize them in parallel. And that's a really big advantage of machine learning. So yes, they're trying to pick the best targets out for the application of their technology. And the other thing I think is interesting in that company, which the learning for me, but is that you are also then combining tech investors with life science investors. And they are different types of investors. So it's the same as in the company itself. You have life scientists, but you have software engineers, you have robotic people. And when you look at what they do, in all honesty, could Big Pharma do it? Yep, they could. But the trouble is, the walls in big pharma, so that getting those sort of disciplines to interact in a cohesive way is really quite challenging in very large companies. But in a 50-person, 100-person company, you get them all in the coffee room together. And then the robotics people realize the life sciences people are normal and that they can actually talk to them and they can talk to each other and understand. But it was interesting with COVID, for example, just to mug me too, but some of the disciplines wouldn't come to work in COVID, and some of the disciplines would. So they reacted differently to COVID. So they behave differently in the way that they think, and that probably won't surprise you. But it means that you have to. But it's a lovely environment of getting these different disciplines to interact and respect each other and learn from each other, which I one of the reasons I like them.
That's amazing. I mean, it makes me smile, but I mean, I totally understand and agree. And I was myself a bit in that scenario where, I mean, in the media content space, but basically a tech company, digital company, applied to biotech, and kind of I'm talking a bit to the two worlds. And yeah, but what's quite amazing is that, let's say 5 years ago was 2 different worlds, and I'm amazed by how quickly it started, like that, or how the overlap like grew pretty fast over the last years. Obviously, Gen AI, GPT, everything helped, I guess, especially make pharma people understand that AI and there's something coming and they should look and try to understand it a bit more. But it's quite amazing, but still, in investors. I mean, I had Thomas Closer from Oaken on the show, and he was saying that finding investors who want to invest in tech and biotech was like finding a panda in the zoo, a baby panda in the zoo. And it's true that, I mean, especially when you try to raise let's say $1 billion valuations, then it's really hard to find. And he also has most of the investors in the US. And but I find it quite. I mean, it's a good. I think it's also very beneficial for.
100%. And I think that what you do is, just as I managed to say with the Avantium thing, where you get people from different worlds around the table, you get different perspectives. So you get the tech investors who think about the world in a different way. Their appetite to risk is different. It's hard for them when you say, I tell you what, we'll put 10 million into an IND and it might fail when we get to the end of it. Now, for a life science investor, that's their daily. That's what they're used to doing. That's not how the tech investor would generally think of the world. And the idea that it fails or succeeds is really quite a hard concept for them to but they bring their own special way of thinking to the idea as well. So I think I like these mix-ups, these sort of potpourris of people coming at it from completely different directions. And we are in LabGenius, I think, at the point where we're going to successfully bring the life science investor together with the tech investors. And that's fantastic because they can learn from each other and we can learn from them and everybody benefits.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean, it's funny what you mentioned about the IND, but also in the tech world, like optimizing something by significant 10% is basically what most digital companies do, and it's very valuable. I mean, whatever productivity tool, like a note-taking app, is just improving something, but if you make it 10%, or I mean, there's a saying, make it 10x better, then people will switch. But you're basically always making better versus taking a huge risk. Yeah. But I think it's, I mean, what you mentioned is a key thing, and I see it I talked with a few tech bio or AI biotech companies, and when they start from the tech angle, they always start to optimize and reducing cost. But I think what you said is very true, that it's not necessarily the value proposition or how what people are buying in the biotech or life science industry or pharma industry, or maybe it's not the best value proposition you can have.
Exactly. And I think you know, if you're going to develop assets, you have to take risks, you have to invest in them and be brave about that and accept the binary nature of pharmaceutical discovery and development. That you offset that with collaborations and so forth. But if you want the big upside, it's like being a gambler. If all you bet is €1, you're not going to win an awful lot of money. You're going to have to bet more than it.
That comes out. I think also it connects to what you discussed, what you mentioned, or what we discussed at what you mentioned at Ablynx, and I think something I also see with platform companies, and then developing the platform is one thing on the biology and on the properties, but actually having a drug in the right indication with the right mechanism of action, with the right market, etc. That's it's quite a lot of other skills or different skills than the biology, and I see. But I can see the similar parallel as in doing the machine learning and the algorithm versus or some other AI application, collecting data and then crossing all the data versus finding a drug and then even developing the drug. I can see let's say, similar dynamics, and similar challenges, I guess.
I think it's true. I think with the ML and AI side, one of the things that you're beginning to see is that the understanding that what's key is, the old story of rubbish in, rubbish out in terms of a model, is that what you have to do is generate data fit for purpose to put into your model. And the idea that you can just, for this type of work, just go onto the internet and find some data and stick it in your model, it doesn't work. And so the key that James got at LabGenius got around was defining careful, quite complex experiments to produce functional data that could be loaded into the models that would give you the ability to predict much more interesting spaces of activity rather than just straightforward binding data or something. So and making sure you do that yourself. You think about the design of the experiments themselves, so you generate your own proprietary data. And it's a similar thing with Achilles, the other company I'm involved in. So it's not the way it presents itself, but it's based upon the fact that it's got a exclusive license, TRACERx, which is a data set that was created in the UK around lung cancer patients. So because the NHS treats basically all patients in the same way, you can actually combine these data from different hospitals in a way that's much harder to do in a lot of other countries where different hospitals have different approaches. And so there are 700 plus patients which have been followed over the long term in terms of their lung cancer. And those data have been collected and allowed the company to develop then a model for predicting what would be the neoantigens, so the cancer-associated, but more importantly, what would be the clonal neoantigens, which are targets which appear on every tumor in the body of those patients. So you can then take a sample of the tumor, you can actually then predict what these clonal neoantigens, the ones that stick all around the body, and develop therapeutic approaches to deal with those. Okay. So it all starts from data. It all starts from very, very high quality data.
And you can have the neoantigens for all these patients in the same.
You do this individually. So this is
individually, but you can compare to all the patients and
well, so built up that thing. So it's all built on really high quality specialist data, which then gives you very powerful predictive methods.
It's an amazing parallel between data in machine learning to data in a cell therapy company, but you have similar dynamics.
Very similar, exactly.
It's crazy. And then you make the perfect transition to Achilles, which I wanted to mention as well. One thing that comes to mind is it's amazing how on the surface it looks like different. I mean, machine learning to industrial biotech to Ablynx platform company, nanobodies. But what fascinates me is how below the surface, the dynamics, there's a lot of similar similar dynamics, which is
Yes,
and similar overlaps of technology.
but you almost, at least for me, I have to be in it to really even see it. So it was a while before I was in Achilles and in LabGenius. I thought, a similarity here. And I hear James going on about why the quality of the data was so important. And then I realized that's exactly what I'd heard from the Achilles founding scientists. But it was presented in a slightly different way, and I was hearing it. But then you suddenly know it's an identical, and it's completely right, but it's an identical point of view. Start off with unique, high-quality data, and then you're in good shape.
And it makes me even connect to actually what we mentioned with Mark de Garidel. And he mentioned about the quality of the clinical trials, and that, I don't remember, one of their phase 2, they didn't meet the endpoints, and it was because how they were basically how the CRO was running the trial was not at all about the drug.
Yeah.
And he emphasized, or shared his experience in that basically on how to run, let's say, properly the clinical trial and not trying to rush too fast.
Yeah.
But having actual great data. And similar story. Maybe quickly on Achilles, then I want to finish on a personal note, but on Achilles, it's basically on solid tumors, and recently Iovance got approval for the first solid tumor cell therapy, solid tumor CAR, TIL therapy approved, which also helped I guess, and helped on the market cap. One thing that I was like, when I looked at the company, I think this is like the lowest market cap to cash balance I've actually seen, which is quite sad to see, but a bit surprising. It's hard for all the, let's say, small cap, especially platform bio companies at the moment. But here, I think was what something like around 50-60 million market cap and 150 million in cash. It was quite surprising, actually. But I guess you don't control the market.
Yeah, the company, this is public knowledge, so you can see it. The company went public in 2021 at about $18 a share, and it's currently about $150. It's just gone up quite a bit because of the Iovance discussions. The company hasn't done anything wrong. It hasn't had a failed clinical trial.
I looked at the news and I'm like, good. So what?
Nothing goes as quickly as you'd like it to, but we're in phase 2 studies. We're waiting for the data. We don't know what that's going to come out with, but what happened is, I think you saw a combination of events. The markets fell. New companies on the market got into trouble because of that. Cell therapy got a bit out of favor, personalized cell therapy. And the Iovance story dragged on a little bit. People weren't sure whether that product was going to get approved or not. And so we suffered a little bit from that. I think, in that 10x, I think just as a board and I feel particularly sorry for the management team in this, because they haven't done anything wrong. They carried out the plan. They worked like crazy. And everyone says, don't look at your share price. But as a CEO, ex-CEO, I know you can't help but look at your share price, and you see it as a reflection of what you're doing. And it isn't a reflection of what they're doing. I think the reflection will be when the data are available. We'll see how that all works out. But the basic premise of what they're doing, which is when you compare with Iovance, so Iovance basically take a tumor from a patient, then find the TILs, which are the body's own way of
tumor infiltrating.
Yeah. So the way in which the body actually attacks the tumor, but the tumor has ways of controlling that. So what you do is you pull that out from the tumor, and then you expand the TILs, make billions of them, and put it back in to basically help the patient heal themselves. The patient's already created these.
You don't actually engineer, so you don't express in your car or anything. Yeah.
So that's how that works. The difference then with the Achilles approach is to say, hang on, there are some TILs in that big mix of TILs which target the clonal neoantigens, the ones that I said are special neoantigens that exist on every tumor. If we can pick those out specially and then expand those, so expand a specific population of the TILs, we hope we may have a more effective medicine. So that's the idea. So it's a little bit like Iovance 2.0. It's going along the same line, but it's trying to pick out a special subgroup of TILs, which it then expands based on that TRACERx data set of lung cancer patients, which is able then to make predictions from.
And the first, if you have a subgroup, then you still have enough quantity.
Yeah, that's what's got to be proved, that you expand them.
So I mean, it's not easy to expand
the
lymphocytes.
For them and for us is always going to be challenging because each tumor, the starting material is different everywhere and everything else. But the prospect of a patient-designed drug that is specific for the patient's neoclonal antigens is very exciting. That's what they do.
And why couldn't you engineer a bit more the till? I mean, once you have extracted it, and that's, I think something
we wouldn't see a reason why you would need to do that
because it is already specific.
The body's already created the right drug. It just needs more of it, and the local environment stops the body producing that. So you take it out and make millions or billions of these cells and put them back in. So you're sort of giving the body a helping hand. You're letting the body create the pharmaceutical, but then you're making more of it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Compared to a CAR T where you take the lymphocytes out, you engineer it to recognize the antigen as a tumor, and then we inject it.
And obviously the potential advantage with this is that you're not doing any engineering, so you're putting back in the natural molecules that were extracted from the patient. These are not new molecules for the patient.
I guess you limit the risk of immune response and of what's the chemo immunostorm. I have a blank on it. Okay, well, let's see. I mean, it shows I think how tough biotech can be sometimes. It's the whole story, but you need to keep on the long term. And also, I mean, what you said, keep on the long term.
And what I agree about this sort of proposition, which is the same as the other ones I get involved in, it's going to sound very facile, but the elevator pitch is obvious. I'm taking a molecule the body's developed specifically to fight this cancer, trying to make it lots more of it, give it back to you, and make you better. That's going to work. Now, whether it works for Achilles or whether it works for somebody else, I am sure in 10 years' time, we'll look back and say, well, of course, that was the right way to do it. That's a patient-specific medicine made from molecules that exist in the patient. That's a great way to do it. So it's so simple. It's obvious. It's the same with LabGenius. What they're doing is, the concept is simple at a high level. Will they be the ones who make it successful? I very much hope so, but somebody will make it successful using this technology to design new therapeutic proteins very effectively and find ones that people can find anywhere else. So that's the exciting part about it. It's sort of obvious. It's gonna work.
But then the execution of it and the long timing, when is it ready to?
You can't predict.
It's hard to. That's great. Maybe from just switching a bit more to a personal note, or finish on a personal note. I'm curious. You seem to like a lot the chairman role. You have 3 of them, but I guess you had many other options from whatever other regular board membership from bigger biotechs or pharma, involved with VCs, whatever. Like, can you share a bit more on what's the rationale behind these 3 boards?
And I'd always say, first of all, that I don't have to be chairman in the company. It just happened like that. I think probably the driver for that comes from the fact that I genuinely like to get involved. What I've found in a small to medium-sized company is that as just a non-executive director, it can be difficult to get access to allow you to leverage what you know and what you do. It's a little bit more tricky because the chairman CEO axis is so critical, and that's got to work very well, and that's key to the company. So that's why I enjoy being part of, because I want to be part of that and offer my services. So I like to get involved. I'm talking to the companies all the time in different ways. So that it's part of my level of engagement in this size of small to medium sized company. What I've chosen not to do, got off point yesterday, is to get involved in sort of short-term consultancies to look at projects. People will say, well, we're thinking of buying this company. Will you look at this company for us and make an assessment? Or private equity companies do that quite a lot. I did a little bit of that. I don't find it very satisfying because I'm involved just at a point of content, and I might write a report, or I tell them I think this or that about the management of the technology, and then they go off and do whatever they do. I'm much more interested in operationally running. How do companies develop? How do they build? How do they hire people? How do they write the business plan? And being with them as they go through those transitions, just sort of giving them some advice and then going on to the next job. I think it's obviously, that's what consultants do, and they like doing it. It's not for me. I want I want to see how this all works out. If you look at the term involved now, I've already been involved with all LabGenius, I think, is at the shortest time, 4 years. These are projects you really get involved in. I have to learn.
I guess it's more entrepreneurial, as it were. Yeah.
And that involvement in the whole aspect, raising money, hiring people, firing people, what sort of business do we want to be? How do we develop that? And going through the different transitions from being a private company to a public company, and that those things I really enjoy, and I want to be part of that.
It makes connect to Roger Novak was on CRISPR Therapeutics and Neil, I forgot his last name, and they mentioned it, and I think they mentioned that quite a lot about, especially with founder CEOs who are maybe a bit less experienced, having very experienced chairman, and that this duo can work very well and bring kind of this like entrepreneurial energy, naivety sometimes can be beneficial, but at the same time really this experience. And when they work together, do you see that? I mean, maybe for example with LabGenius, can you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can see that. I think what from the experienced chair point of view, if I can call myself that, where you have to be very careful is not always coming with what you think are pre-baked solutions. Because it's boring for the CEO to be told this is the way to do it. It's also wrong because it's not always true. So what you
really going into deeply understanding,
and I think what you have to do is more likely provide options. Say these are the sorts of choices you can consider, or challenge some of the conclusions of me. But rather than saying this is the answer, it can be frustrating because as a CEO for 20 years, I always sort of knew what the answer was. And so you get to, you think, I know the answer, this is obvious. But you realize that's not the way to be.
How many times have you been proven wrong in the last years where you thought the answer was this and it was not this?
I can't remember the exact number. Not a huge number. But I think what you do have to remember is that unless the CEO gets there in their own way, you haven't got a solution. If you try and impose, you're working different ways and at different speeds and in different ways and different sort of shades of grey in terms of what the right solution is. It's got to be their solution. So you really just got to try and you'll put a red flag up. If you can see something that's a dead end, don't go down that dead end. That's horrible. But the other thing, they've got to find the right thing that suits for them. So I think it's giving those ranges, and I think more also quite often when I'm being talking to new companies, they say, well, what's your style as a chairman? And people have been through what I have, but I've got a tendency to come in and say, this is the way I work. Now, I actually say, well, I think I should adapt to the way that James wants to work, or Niraj or Kidneys, and not me impose upon them the way I work. Certainly, I've got certain sort of styles and certain quirks and so on, but it's best to fit, it's more fit, and I've got to fit and try and, I want to say gaps, but I've got to support the areas where they don't have strengths, and the area where they've got strengths, let them carry on. So that's what I found interesting, is figuring out, some of them like a lot of contact, some of them like to check things with you quite regularly. And I think with James, a good example is that early on, he, and it was probably my fault, thought there were things that were too small to bring to my attention. And it took me a little while to realize that. And then I said to him, well, there's nothing to talk like. And we're friends, we're colleagues. You can come to me with anything, and if I think you're working at the wrong level, I can always tell you. So he then felt much more open, and nothing that was too small, because if it's important enough to be bothering him, talk about it. And so I think,
and also the small thing gives you a deep understanding of
exactly, and there can be, for first time CEOs, there are things they just haven't done before. That's the nature. We've all been first time, whatever. You first time you interview someone, there'll be things you learn from that, and you go on, and you'll have done things then that you'd never have done again, or whatever. Yeah. And so you can just see some of those things, and you see them coming. You can help them with that. But it's good. I think it's got to be. You mustn't overwhelm, because it's all about. At the end of the day, they are the boss of the company, not you.
I was about to say,
yeah.
But you mentioned also is owning the business plan. I mean, at the end of the day, they are executing, and they have to. I mean, even if the solution, you propose a solution, it's still the management team or the CEO who is actually trying
100% agree.
to do
I
it.
think one of the things that when I'm talking to different CEOs, not just the ones that I'm talking about that I'm directly involved in, I think sometimes what they find hard is they're very happy to take the credit when things go well. But when things, particularly out of their control, don't go well, then they say, well, that's not my fault. And I say, no, it's not your fault, but you're accountable. But you're this joke. You can't have it both ways. And if a clinical trial were to fail, then the CEO is, at the end of the day, the way you're going to look at it, even if it wasn't their fault. But that's what that's the positives and negatives. You can't just want to have the good times. So it's one of those learning things, and giving them support in times like this, I think, is really important. And having the feeling that in
perspective, I guess.
Someone that that today's a bad day, but tomorrow's going to get better. And then just helping them and look at what are the good things that you can see here, because sometimes when things are going wrong, it's easy to focus on just the negative. What's happening? Yeah, but let's look at the bigger picture. What have we got here? We've got a company that's got these investors, it's got this technology, it's got this great group of people in the company. That's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, it's almost a bit like a coaching role, but this is also super valuable. I mean, I can imagine as a CEO founder, I mean, who else would really give this? Provide this kind of value, and even from a company building and shareholder, it's just an amazing role. I mean,
I think the other thing that becomes valuable from it is that you're doing it not from a theoretical, this is an MBA, I've read an MBA. They know you've been there. That doesn't mean that you're right about everything, but they recognize if they have a hard board meeting and it's not gone their way, and I can go to them and say, yeah, I sat in a hard board meeting, and I've been the one who didn't get the pitch right, or people didn't agree with me, and it's frustrating, but this isn't what we have to do, and I like that. So you can help them bounce back from the more difficult things.
You need experience. I like, actually, it's funny to wrap up, but the one thing that came out of my mind and out of memory from this, when we talked in 2018, was actually this line of like, as a CEO, you receive credit when everything goes well, but then you get hit on the back when things go badly. And I found this clarity about it, which I found pretty I mean, first I could relate to it as CEO myself, and I think, it's, I mean, I think it's very true. But I think you're very approach to it of taking full ownership, especially when things are bad, and that I think that is very difficult to do.
Yeah.
But once you embrace it, then.
Once you embrace it, and it's easier said than done, but where you depersonalize it, you don't take it in your heart, if you know what I mean, which is a little bit harder to do. But
that's very hard when you found a company that's basically very interesting.
But you have to sort of say, okay, this didn't work out. And the main thing is, I think one of the lessons, talked to James about quite a lot, is that boards don't want to be confronted by problems. So if you've got a failed clinical trial, which is not what changes their experience, but one day we will have clinical trials, and you go to the board and say it failed, you will get massacred by that board. They'll tell you what you did wrong and everything else. So what you've got to go to them, and this is what we're going to do next. Everybody wants to know what you're going to do next when something goes wrong, and that's what the CEO. That's the great thing about being CEO. You are in the position, you're the guy who's managing the orchestra. You can point the violins and say they're going to play for 20 minutes while we figure out what to do. So you can actually lay out that forward plan, but that's what you've got. I think sometimes people think, the board wants to hear what happened. Well, they do, but they want to know what's going to happen next.
That's the solution, yes.
Yeah. And even good news, they want to say, okay, right, that's good news. How are we going to build on that good news? Does that mean we're going to raise money, or we're going to have a big collaboration, or whatever it may be? So you've got to. That's what you always got to be forward thinking. Just the reporting bit of what happened is the least important part of the CEO's job. It's got to be done very well and very clear, but it's the creativity is saying what's going to happen next.
That's amazing. Sounds like it's you're fitting in this role. I mean, sounds very balanced, and it sounds like you're enjoying it, and that it's
never the same as being the member of a single team.
And I was about to challenge you on why not being executive another, but
yeah, I looked at a few, and never say never. I think the other thing I like a lot about this role, which you got the hint of, is that being a CEO of a particular company, you get very expert in it, you know what we're doing, But you can get a bit lazy because you are expert in it. You know, when the day you told me about Ablynx, I knew everything about Ablynx. I knew everything there was about nanobodies. But now I'm thrown into machine learning. I'm thrown into environmental chemistry, I knew nothing about those things when I went there. So I had to learn. So each day it meant
exciting.
And I like, as you get older, the challenge of not being relaxed about what you know. Yeah, I know some stuff, because if I didn't know some stuff, I'd be no use to anybody at all. But I'm just in awe at some of the things I learn every day from the different interactions with the companies around the technology, the end markets, all those things. And that's what gets me excited.
So it's great. I think it's a great wrap up to our whole discussion. I mean, really enjoyed it. I really love these like longer formats, because we can explore deeper and we can see how things are so connected.
Yeah.
And how the content, it fascinates me from our discussion, just to summarize a bit, but on how the story Ablynx and building a platform is connected to other platforms, how the dynamics are similar, how the experience, how everything. It's great. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much indeed. Lovely.
Great. Thanks for listening to the end. I was amazed by Edwin's really deep experience, and it also fascinates me how things can look so different in life sciences on the surface, but if you dig a bit, actually have so many similarities. If you have enjoyed this episode, please hit the like, follow button, and if you are listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, you can leave us a 5-star review. Any of these actions would help us a lot. I would also be curious to hear what you think, so I can improve further and help you grow you further. If you could comment wherever you are, if you're on social media or on YouTube, or send me an email to Philip@Flot.bio. All right, see you in the next episode.